this isn't just 2019, this is 2020 as well, these regs.
Yes, everything we're going to be talking about here is this step towards Ross Brawn's vision of what Formula One should be in the future. So we know we've got some regulations, big regulation changes coming up for 2021.
Right.
And this is all aimed at overtaking and make the sport more exciting. But for 2019, it's a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction to what was a very dull race in Melbourne. But equally, some of the findings from Ross Brawn's research group have been brought forwards for 2019 to try and help improve overtaking in the short term before the big reg changes in 2021.
And we see that initially at the front wing and also mods to the rear wing.
Yep, okay, so we've got our 3D of the car, so if we just bring that along now, have a look at the front wing. I mean, for how many years? Since 2009, front wings have been growing in complexity. They were widened, 2017 they were narrowed a bit, but the complexity, the number of elements has just gone mad. So the problem with this is that they create a lot of turbulence because a lot of the work of the front wings we're always talking about is managing this front tyre wake to push it away from the car, which means it then goes into the car behind.
Right.
So the aim would be is to try and produce a wing that creates less of this outwash to push the air around the tyres. So much more of the turbulence of the tyre is going back into the car rather than out around it, which obviously is bad for that car's aerodynamics, but better for the following cars.
Right.
So some of the key reg changes here is that they've simplified the front wing, just 5 elements now, non-overlapping. You can't have the winglets and the cascades over it. You can't split them up into little sections by putting slots in them. So it's just 5 elements. And they have to meet a much more simplified front wing end plate. And this front wing end plate can only have so much camber going outwards, so you can't have this aggressive outwash. And again, it has to be one piece, so we're not going to have lots of little flaps and veins and cuts put into that. So that's really going to be the big change, which reduces the wake of the leading car to improve the job of the car following it. Added to that, again, this is only the intention of the regulations. Right. The actual wording hasn't come out yet, but from speaking to the technical directors, they're also going to define a weight for the front wing and define some new stiffnesses for the front wing, so people aren't twisting it, aren't making it bend in directions that it's not supposed to do. So this really should take away this whole question mark of overly complicated front wings spoiling the racing for other cars. So this really is the key thing that's going on here.
And while you're saying all that, I'm thinking, what is Adrian Newey thinking? He loves those front wings, those complex front wings. Exactly.
So we have to see exactly how they word the regulations, because there's lots of things you could potentially do with the leading edge shape of the wing and how the curvature around the wing goes. So we need to see if they've got some radius dimensions or some tangential regulations, much like we had with side pods back in 2009.
And what's happening with front brake ducts?
Okay, so it's all about controlling the wake of the car, and this is mainly about the tyre wake. So the front wing's very influential, but so are the brake ducts. And as we've seen, front brake ducts over the past few years have had fins, flicks, slots, all sorts of bits added to them. They're all going to be cleaned up. It's a very simple rule. It's not as big a change as the front wing or other aspects of the regulation changes. But furthermore, the other thing they're going to change is to prevent you having a blown front axle, which we've seen, over the past few years, teams purposely blowing air through a hollow front axle out through the middle of the wheel nut. This isn't a cooling device. This is an aerodynamic device which helps this outwash effect. So that's going to be banned as well. So your brakes, wheel nuts are going to be much, much simpler.
Changes too to the Bargeboards, but not just technical stuff here.
No, this is one of the strange changes. This was announced before the actual aero regulations, and this is actually a marketing-led thing. Now, we recall the Bargeboards and the vanes around the side pods, and this whole area was made much more complicated in 2017. The problem with this is, with these complex Bargeboards, you can't put a sponsor sticker over this broken up surface. So the teams requested, could we lower the Bargeboards in order to free up the side of the chassis, as you can see here, for sponsorship. Now, I don't think of many teams that actually have sponsor logos in this area anyway. There's very few sponsor logos, full stop in F1. But this change is purely for marketing. So the lowering of the Bargeboards, and they've actually allowed them to come a bit forwards as well. It will be an aero impact, but it's not as dramatic as with the front wing. So this really, as I say, just marketing, and potentially Bargeboards and the area around the front of the side pods will be something that will be tackled much better in 2021.
And changes to the rear wing too, both marketing and overtaking led.
Yeah, so we've got a mix of regulations. Again, some were announced early. So one of the things, much like with the barge boards, is the top of the rear wing end plate has these slots which reduce drag. And again, it makes it very hard to put stickers over them for sponsors. Ferrari have done very well with their fuel sponsor there over the year. It's still, you can still tell exactly who it is.
Yeah.
So these have been flattened off. So this will have an aero impact on the car because it will increase drag slightly. But we can find some very clever ways of playing about with that, I'm sure, from the teams. But then the other change, and it's an unusual one really, we know that Ross Brawn's no fan of DRS. But in order to encourage overtaking, not only are they going to improve the wake of the cars, but improve the DRS effect. So the rear wing gets a bit bigger, gets a bit deeper, a bit wider, and the gap that you're allowed to create when DRS opens is being increased by 10 millimetres, which should even further change the amount of drag reduction you get when DRS opens. So again, you know, another little change and something we expect probably to be overturned when we reach 2021 with the new regulations to find another way of allowing overtaking and not something as artificial as DRS.